So let's get started. Welcome to the Family Support webinar. Good afternoon. I'm Christine Felicetti. I'm with the Pennsylvania Family Support Team based here at the Center for Schools and Communities, and I'm going to be your moderator today. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, our Family Support webinar, Nurturing Emotional Growth, Trauma-Informed Approaches to Social and Emotional Competence for Adults and Children. Our presenter today is Stephanie Colvin-Roy. Stephanie has spent over 15 years providing professional development in prevention education and youth development. Stephanie provides professional development, consultation, and technical assistance to schools and youth serving agencies with a focus on SEL. As the Training and Organizational Development Associate for the Center for the Promotion of Social and Emotional Learning at the Center for Schools and Communities, Stephanie is the lead international trainer and manages the I Can Problem Solve and Raising a Thinking Child programs. She worked as an adjunct professor teaching personal resiliency, diversity and inclusion, and was certified in the PA Student Assistance Program, also known as SAP, and serves on the PASAP BOD. Stephanie is certified in Lifeline Suicide Prevention, ICPS, a Castle SEL program, and Lion's Quest, an evidence-based social emotional learning program. She has received training in social emotional learning and character education, courageous conversations beyond diversity, and supporting students exposed to trauma. It is my pleasure to welcome Stephanie this afternoon. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Christine. Welcome, everyone. As Christine mentioned, this presentation today will be specifically integrating the arts and music, parent involvement with child development through the lens of social and emotional competence and also trauma-informed approaches. Arts and music provide us with a natural pathway for nurturing emotional expression and fostering connection. These creative outlets align with our protective factors framework by strengthening specifically social connections, also supporting emotional regulation and promoting resilience in families. Using a trauma-informed lens means that we'll be recognizing the barriers that trauma may create and providing a safe and nurturing opportunity for emotional growth through accessible activities like art and music. These are our topics today. We'll take, in the beginning, we'll look a little bit more in depth about social and emotional competence, specifically from a trauma-informed perspective. Then we'll talk specifically about some activities for engaging parents and their children by integrating the arts and music, supporting children with developmental delays. So on each of our activities, there'll be some suggestions for how we might make it more accessible to all children. Also connecting to the CSSP protective factors framework, and then finally ending with some questions and answers. I like to do presentations in a pretty active way, so please do feel free to ask questions. I don't have my chat up right now, but I will in just a second. And pretty quickly, we're going to be going into breakout rooms to have a discussion. So just be prepared for that. That'll happen in about 5 minutes. So if we look at social and emotional competence, my definition comes from CASTLE, which is the Collaborative for Academic Social and Emotional Needs. And that definition includes the competencies that you see on your screen. But to sort of simplify social and emotional competence, really relates to our ability to understand, manage, and express emotions effectively, to establish and maintain positive relationships, and demonstrate responsible decision-making. It encompasses the competencies or skills, including self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, beginning with the self. So those self-awareness and self-management or self-regulation are what happens first, and then we move as they've developed competencies into things like social awareness, effective friendship skills, and responsible decision making. Trauma can significantly affect a person's ability to develop and also utilize social and emotional skills. Adverse experiences such as abuse, neglect, violence, or chronic stress can disrupt the brain's development, particularly in areas that are responsible for emotion regulation, decision making, and social connections. This can hinder the ability to fully engage with social and emotional competencies. And so, my goal is to almost to sort of create or set the stage so that if people are experiencing trauma, whether it's adults or children, the environment where we're teaching these skills is more receptive to and accommodating of some of those needs. In terms of trauma around self-awareness, this might mean if someone has experienced trauma, that they may have some difficulty with managing and expressing their emotions. And this is due primarily to an overwhelming amount of feelings. With self-awareness or self-regulation, sometimes there's an impaired regulation of emotions and impulses, which might lead to the child acting out or withdrawing. So, and we'll see some activities specifically for that withdrawal type of behavior. In social awareness, sometimes it is difficult for people experiencing trauma to empathize. And that really is about a level of hypervigilance, really kind of needing to sort of be aware of what's going on, or experience with mistrust in the past. So in some ways, I see that mistrust as actually a protective factor at times. I think, why should they just automatically trust us? That type of thing takes a little bit of time. They may have some difficulty forming and maintaining relationships. This is primarily due to attachment disruptions. And with decision making, sometimes they have a hard time being able to really decide whether a consequence is going to be a hindrance or cause a negative reaction. And so they may need a little bit more assistance with making thoughtful choices. They also may be impulsive, and that again has to do with this survival mindset. So biologically and psychologically, what this basically means is that trauma keeps us in fight, flight, freeze mode, making it harder to process and regulate emotions. It can impact cognitive or executive functioning because trauma affects our prefrontal cortex, reducing the abilities to problem solve and decision make. However, these skills can be taught and reinforced. Also with trauma, it does affect the amygdala and the hippocampus, so it can be harder for people to calm down once they've experienced stress. I realize that for a lot of you, this is repeat information, but I really do feel it's important to ground what we're doing and what I'm saying with this lens. So what that means in terms of implementing social and emotional competence is that we establish predictable and supportive environments, that we really focus on the relationships, fostering trust through consistency and not only consistency, but consistent positive interactions. Specifically teaching emotional regulation. This is things like mindfulness, breathing techniques to help people to recognize when they may be in an agitated state and to help them then to bring that to bring calm or peace in. And this the emotion regulation is extremely valuable, not only the young people that you work with, but also their parents and caregivers. Also being patient and flexible, and recognizing that progress may be slow and that progress is not the same for everyone. So how this connects with the protective factors framework. In terms of parental resilience, this is about providing, or how the arts and music can serve as tools for stress relief and emotion regulation, again, for both parents and children. And then emphasizing the role of trauma-informed strategies so that we can support parents to model these techniques when there are emotionally challenging moments. In terms of social connection, this is those positive relationships that not only provide emotional, but also informational and practical support. And specifically how this relates to this workshop today is about having the parents and children working together. So they'll be engaging in things like collaborative art projects, music, and games. And again, this not only helps to foster connection between the adult and child, but between children and other children, and adult parents and other parents. Creating that safe space really is of utmost importance, so that parents and children are feeling supported and valued within their community. In terms of knowledge of parenting and childhood development, this is specifically about how arts and music might enhance our ability to express emotions and also to help with emotion development. In terms of concrete support in times of need, this is about perhaps providing specific information about resources that are arts and music based, sharing different ideas. And then finally, in terms of social and emotional competence, we'll talk about the value of telling stories, reading stories together, incorporating music and movement that are aligned with social and emotional skills, and also teaching parents how they might utilize and nurture these competencies on a daily basis. Would someone be willing to unmute and read this quote to us from Fred Rogers? Karen, can I pick on you to unmute?
Sure.
Thank
It's
you.
the things we play with and the people who help us play that make a great difference in our lives. Fred Rogers.
So this one in particular, I selected because I am pretty passionate about play and the importance of play. So we will go into that in a little bit more depth, but I'd like you to take one more look at this quote, because then I have a couple questions for you about some of the benefits of play and what it might look like to be more intentional about incorporating it. So again, it's the things we play with and the people who help us to play that makes a great difference in our lives. In our breakout groups, to increase engagement, not only right off the bat, but then hopefully this will set the stage for the rest of the presentation. I'd like you to think about these two questions. Firstly, the benefits of play, and then what would it look like if we were more intentional about integrating play in our work with parents and children? So a twofold question. And Rachel, if you wouldn't mind putting us into breakout groups, we'll be there for about 8 minutes. Be prepared to lift up some of the things that you heard in your conversations. Thank you, and see you soon. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Would anyone be willing to talk a little bit about or lift up something that was mentioned in their group, either about the benefits of play or what it might look like if we're more intentional about incorporating play with the work that we do with parents and children. And I do understand that you might be doing this already, but I do like the idea of really being intentional throughout this presentation of what that might look like. Feel free to unmute yourself, and you certainly can use the text box as well.
I just wanted to say that children learn through play, no matter what age. There's all kinds of age appropriate things like we use for our ASQs to see where a child is in their developmental milestones. And it's fun. It's easier for a kid to pick up a skill through a play than necessarily sitting there and saying, you need to be doing this.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that, Mary. And Miranda has said getting down on a child's level and engaging. Exactly. Yeah, I think it just is, when we're playing with kids, we automatically sort of begin to accommodate and move down on their level. And Jason's saying play is not only positive for kids, but beneficial for the parents' well-being. Absolutely. Jason, would you like to speak a little bit more on that, about specifically about the parents' well-being?
I mean, I think it's just important to note that, like, if you can make matching socks fun for the kid, it's going to be fun for you. And not everything has to be a daunting task or a chore. And if we send that positive message that this work or play that we're doing is fun, then it may translate into schoolwork or a job later on in the future.
Yes, yes, very nicely said. Thank you for that. And I agree. I think, when we have sort of this lightheartedness towards some things, we can't but then help to almost feel it. It's almost like that, they tell you to smile when you don't feel like smiling, and that it can have an effect on your mood. So I kind of think about it in a similar way. If we engage in play often, it just kind of, people start to relax and just settle in and connect.
And one of the things that we talked about too, I brought up, is that some of the parents that I work with, due to their backgrounds, they don't know how to play.
Yes.
Or they didn't have the opportunity to play when they were a child in regards with their parent. So teaching them that it's okay to sit on the floor. It's okay they don't have to do what the directions say. They can, one of our other ladies, I believe it was Jennifer, brought up about using the toys to learn different things. If you're using blocks, okay, you count them, you look at the colors, you do this, you do the shapes, you do this. Sometimes parents don't think about that. They think it has to be a certain way. So yes. I think integrating play is so important with the parents in a sense, teaching them how to play. Some just don't know. They've never had that experience.
Right. Great thinking. One of the things that I think was frustrating for me as a mother, and I realized, so I had trouble playing with my kids. I would take them places, and I could really, and of course they came to me for cuddles, but their dad was the one that was good at playing. And for me, honest to God, it was mind numbing. I just, making the dolls talk and things like that, it didn't come naturally for me. It was very awkward. And then what I realized, I actually learned it from a children's book. It was kind of this simple, like, scholastic book, nobody really noteworthy in terms, nobody you'd know author wise or illustration wise. But the book was called My Box and String. And it was about this child who made a box and string, the string that would drag the box. And along the way, he meets other people, and they use the box for different things. So what he realized was that play for him was the making of the box and string, and other people then played differently with it. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that was me. You know, I used to make the Barbie house and then my sister would play in it. But I got so much enjoyment out of the play part. And then later, my one child was in play therapy, and one of the activities that we did as a family was we created a house with blocks and other manipulatives. And I really felt like I could succeed at that because it was play and we were all talking and sharing. But for me, it was a play that made more sense and was more accessible. So, you know, think about, you know, the things that you might have, the manipulatives that you might have that would allow people to play and engage in ways that are maybe more like that versus just sort of spontaneous imaginary play. Maggie has a quote or a comment in the chat, encouraging our families to play with their children, allowing them to explore without boundaries. An example is not telling the child to use the purple crayon for a flower, but rather that they can choose their own. They can choose what piece to put where. This teaches them critical thinking skills. You learn so much about a child by watching them play and allowing them to lead the play. Excellent thinking. Thank you for sharing that. Nice work in these groups. So let me come back to sharing and if it'll let me. Yep. Just can I get a thumbs up? Actually, Carol, you're on my screen. Are you seeing the slide set? Great. So some of the benefits of play, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between unstructured play and structured play. So structured play is the type of play that involves specific activities with a well-defined purpose, and it's typically guided by an instructor. So very often this is what we're doing. So when we're being intentional about play, we're thinking about it, and then we're going to guide parents and children. What I would say is that I think this idea that was shared in the chat about, you know, the flexibility and the inviting people to be a little bit more creative and not follow specifically this is how we're going to play can also be very valuable. And what this will do in terms of structured play is it helps us to increase development of social skills. So young people are interacting with others. It also can improve cognitive ability. So this enhances things like, and this was mentioned also in the chat, problem solving skills, the ability to follow instructions, and then supporting cognitive growth. Unstructured play is, in some ways, I think it's almost becoming mislabeled. Like we need to find another term for it, because true unstructured play is also extremely beneficial for young people, but it means that an adult is not present. So the kids have the opportunity to sort of explore and play without an adult hovering. And that includes the playground, because typically there is an adult, even though the adults may not be doing the best job of watching the children, there's an adult still present. And so the kids are aware of that. So for the purpose of this particular presentation, we will say that unstructured play might look like children playing as they please in an open playground and without specific guidance about what they're supposed to be doing. And what this does is it fosters creativity, allowing children to explore their environment and their interests freely, and promoting not only creativity, but also self-reliance. In terms of parent-child bonding, participating in unstructured play strengthens the emotional connection that happens between parents and children and contributes to a sense of security and trust. Would anyone like to add to this or thoughts about this particular idea of unstructured and structured play? So as we explore ways to incorporate arts and music, think about how this improves social and emotional competence and also how it connects to the protective factors framework. We're going to look now at some specific ideas or activities. Many of these will be familiar to you. So as we go through them, I'd like you to think about how we might spice them up a little bit, how we might make them more conducive to arts and music and movement, how we might increase connection, cognitive abilities, physical abilities. The first one, and this is one you're probably all familiar with, is a music freeze. This is when we play music and we invite the parents and children to move and dance. Then they freeze when the music stops. We may want to add variations like when you freeze into a specific shape. You could have the shape connect with the adult. So maybe you have the adult and the child create a circle or create a square, or they have to freeze with their, their two hands touching or a hand and an elbow touching. Just little things to, again, sort of bring in this concept of laughter and fun. In terms of adaptations for our young people who may be experiencing some developmental delays, providing visual cues like a stop sign for freezing, gestures, using slower music, and encouraging parents to assist with children's movement may be very helpful. And I do want to just mention that a lot of the things that I'm going to suggest for including children with developmental delays are actually really great for all children. It's not just exclusive to those children with developmental delays. The parachute is something I would really love to come back. When I was little, I always looked forward to parachute day in phys ed class. But you don't have to have a colored parachute. You can do this with a larger sheet. And the adults and the children are holding on to the edges, lifting it up and down. Then you can put objects in and they can bounce it by moving their hands up and down. I don't know if you remember, but at least when I was little, we would put some very soft balls in the parachute and we'd say popcorn, and the balls would go bouncing. So Rigel loves the parachute too. Really, before I worked at the center, I had the opportunity to be trained in a phys ed program, and I thought, this is my opportunity to bring the parachute back. And what I can tell you is that young people absolutely love it. And it's something that's very easy for adults and children to do together. This isn't, rocket science to figure out, there's not a whole lot of complication with this particular activity. And to accommodate, we would add lightweight objects. That just makes sense regardless. And then maybe we incorporate some options. So if children are not able to remain standing, we can have them sit down. We can have them touch the parachute. Some children might be a little bit put off by the parachute. So things like allowing them to touch it and experience it rather than holding it. Also, maybe fewer movements and holding the sheet down or the parachute down a little bit lower. This next one is one of my favorites, the sensory treasure hunt. So we would have, I'm actually thinking this would be cool to do in like a parent cafe. So you would have bins filled with sensory materials, things that have texture. So shredded paper, beans, rice. This is an activity. Anytime you have the sensory materials that are small like that, you need to keep an eye on the kids and encourage the parents to keep an eye on them. I was the mom whose child put a bean up their nose. Which I learned later that a plant can actually grow if it's left unattended. So that was interesting. And then you hide small objects for children and their parents to find within the bins. and then they work together to discover the treasures. Maybe you could even talk about having them guess, what do you think it is? What's another thing that it might be? So really encouraging them to think of lots of different things. And then to be more inclusive, if we use a little bit larger and easier to grasp objects, then this provides more opportunities for children who might not have those fine motor skills, and providing textured objects to engage with the sensory seeking. Another one of my favorites is story time with movement, selecting a story where children and parents can act out parts, where they can answer open-ended questions that may have multiple answers. Putting in simple props like scarves. One of my favorite things to add is puppets. Finding books that may have a tactile element to them, so a touching and feel type of book, or even just having textile things around. So as you're reading, if there's something in the story about, a blanket that's rough, we give them an opportunity to feel what a rough blanket might feel like. And also to make it more inclusive, allow nonverbal responses, a thumbs up. Allowing a child to use a puppet to talk can be very, very effective. They might whisper their answer to the puppet, or you can even hand the puppet over to a child who might be a little bit more shy and withdrawn, and they may be very receptive to talking and answering questions through the puppet. Pointing and mimicking can also be really effective. I just want to take a peek at the chat because I'm seeing some things coming in. Maggie says a fun, unique way for a sensory bin using shredded paper, no beans up the nose. That's always a good thing. Oh, and Karen, a nice comment. So for people who are not feeling inspired about play, structured play like checkers can be useful for learning how to explore winning and losing, cheering someone on, asking questions, and more. I totally agree. That's excellent, excellent point. Unstructured play with support can be fun, provide great learning opportunities for all. Thank you for those comments. Excellent. Another one that I really like is a collaborative art project. So the one that we're looking at here would be a collage where we would provide lots of different materials, stickers, colored pencils, glue sticks, and invite parents and children to work together to co-create a mural or a collage, or even some other, it doesn't have to be, on the grand scale, something sort of at tables, smaller and more manageable. To include those children, again, with things like some challenges around fine motor skills, incorporating things like larger crayons, chunky paintbrushes, so things that are a little bit easier to grasp. And then again, that idea about textured materials. So even if they don't contribute directly with the collage making, we can allow them to experience and touch and hold the different materials that are being used. We have the beanbag toss. This is one that's a little bit more active. I think it's always really fun to set up things like put hula hoops on the floor or buckets. A lot of these things are reasonable to purchase. And then parents and children can take turns tossing beanbags or soft toys into those targets. And for our children who maybe have a little bit less mobility, we can move those targets closer, use lightweight objects or larger objects in order to be more inclusive. Another activity I did in that as a family in the play therapy class was we had a feather and a straw, and we had to blow the feather to it. We had a start point and an end point. And it seems like this, this silly little thing, but my son just thought that was the greatest thing in the world. He had so much fun with that, with the feather race. A bubble chase. I love incorporating bubbles. They can chase the bubbles if you've got the room for that. Pop them with their hands, their knees, their elbows, so we can get things going, cross laterally. So they, maybe they pop with the right elbow and pop with the left foot. Having parents and children each take turns blowing the bubbles. So one is a bubble blower, and then the other's a chaser or a popper, and then switching. And for those children with developmental delays, maybe we have a larger bubble wand, so it's easier to hold, allowing children to watch and reach out and provide assistance if needed. In what ways do the previous activities from your thinking align with protective factors? So any thoughts on that? I agree, Jennifer. I think bubbles are fun for all ages. Any thoughts on activities and how they might align? And we'll look specifically as well. And please feel free to put comments in chat if you would like. Oops. I also wanted to talk about rocking, singing, and moving together. There is something just so wonderful about, when we're doing art projects together, when we're reading stories together, to incorporate things like a parent rocking with their child, the act of singing and moving together. Singing in particular is something that actually awakens the vagus nerve, which automatically helps to reduce stress. So this idea of moving and singing, it helps to enhance attachment through holding, eye contact. Rocking fosters a secure attachment between an adult and child. In terms of emotion connection, these experiences often give us a sense of togetherness and strengthen that social and emotional bond. In terms of supporting social and emotional development, engaging in musical activities helps to build trust and improve communication between adults and children. It also, things like singing foster a sense of connection, cohesion, togetherness, and enhance a child's sense of belonging. In terms of cognitive and motor skills, singing supports language and early literacy in young children, and moving to music engages the larger muscle groups and gross motor development. Any other ideas that you have for incorporating arts, music, and movement into your work? And again, all of these, one of the ideas that sort of I'm trying to pull through the whole presentation is the idea of laughter and play and fun, and how we might make things lighter and more and increase people's receptiveness to it. In terms of parental resilience, things like mindfulness with guided music relaxation, anything that incorporates breath work. So inhaling to the count of 3, exhaling to the count of 4. And however you want to do that. Singing too, again, helps with that to stimulate the vagus nerve and help bring people down to more calmness. But the importance, I just wanted to mention the importance of the exhale being a little bit longer. Some people, when we have them breathe, when we're doing sort of guided or structured breathing, often they will inhale, exhale, and if it's the same amount of time, sometimes it actually can make people more agitated. So this idea of exhaling for a beat or 2 longer really helps to consciously bring people more to center. Parent and child collaborative art projects tie directly with social connections. So again, maybe we do this in stations and more intentionally. And then in terms of child development, providing a mini lesson using music to specifically support language and emotional development. So before we get to the questions, I just want to wrap up a couple of the ideas that, that we've shared today. Some of those ideas for involving parents in the development of social and emotional competence really have to do with intentional sharing time. And we'll look at some specific examples of that. Things like having a family art and or music exploration, and then teaching how we can integrate these things into daily routines. So they're able to take what they're learning with us and be able to connect that and do those things at home. These are some specific ideas for emotion expression. The emotion collage, emotion charades, and I would say this one says with music. I would encourage you to incorporate music often. Drumming out feelings can be something that is really fun for kids. You can get a pool noodle and cut the noodle into sort of large drumsticks and then do activities with those. A couple of pool noodles will supply all the adults and children in your programs. Emotion representative drawing. And then on the side, you see two specific examples: creating a collage that represents how you feel using different images and colors, and then also playing instrumental or classical music, and having people draw what they feel as they're listening to the music, shapes, lines, different colors to represent how the music is making people feel. Adapting art and music activities specifically with children with developmental delays, just to sort of capture the main ideas. We're providing visual cues, simplifying instructions, incorporating things like gestures. We're providing sensory-friendly alternatives. It might be textures, clay, sandpaper, silk, larger and easier to grasp objects and different variations with movement. And then repetition and routine really helps to make people feel a sense of consistency and contributes to a safe and inclusive space. And the benefits of play. If we balance structured and unstructured play, this is absolutely crucial for a child's holistic development, and it provides them with lots of different opportunities to learn and grow. It also provides parents with opportunities to specifically support their child's development. In terms of our protective factors framework, the big ones that come out of this are helping foster parental resilience through creative activities, giving them the ability to model appropriate responses for their children, strengthening those social connections through things like family or collaborative arts programs, and building children's social and emotional competence through things like those specific emotional enhancement activities. And this brings us to the end, but I do want to just lift up this idea of when we incorporate consistent actions, small and intentionally incorporating play, engaging in the arts and music, this can really help to strengthen resilience, enhance emotional competence, and reduce the negative effects or the impact of trauma. I realize we're sort of at the 0 hour here, but we do have at least 3 minutes to talk about some things that you might have tried and want to share, or any questions that you may have. And Maggie, I see you need to run. Thank you so much for attending today. Shannon says she likes the idea of adding music and movement into visits. Yes, if the way, I think, if you're doing that specifically with one-on-one visits, it gives sort of a permission to, to connect and engage in a different way. And I'd be curious to learn if that engagement is it does even, if this is more conducive to forming bonds with people.
I am definitely going to try it in the future visits. Thank you for that tip.
Yes, you bet. Thank you. I like this idea that Maggie said about that shredded paper instead of the beams. I think if we have textured paper, that too can be really effective.
I think
Any
sometimes
other
there's like
questions or
a,
thoughts?
sorry, I just
Yeah,
had
Christine.
one. I'm thinking of teachable moment for my sister when she was sharing something about my nephew. When he was really young, he found out how to use the scissors and cut the oatmeal packets open. And she turned it into a moment where, oh, you want to play. Let's spread it around a little bit, in versus the reaction that you might normally have. So she turned it into a play moment.
Yes, wonderful, wonderful.
All right. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for your presentation today. A lot of great, helpful information.
Oh, and I will put in the chat, I have a book list that I can share with you, that are specifically books about art, music, and movement. So I will put that in there for you all.
So your opinion matters. Please complete the survey that will be sent out, and our upcoming webinars are January 15th. The focus will be on building on strengths, expanded definitions, and research support for strengthening families' protective factors. And in February, we're not sure of the date yet, but supporting brain development will be a focus. Thank you for joining us today. You will receive an electronic evaluation in your email, so please take the time to fill that out. Registration information for next webinar will be emailed to you soon. So thank you. And this is the conclusion of our webinar today. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.